family, friends, and YouTube. Today I kind of want to talk about a transition I made from a Suzuki Hayabusa to a Honda Goldwing. And a lot of people want to know how does that happen? How does somebody go from one extreme to the other? And I don't compare them as one extreme to the other. I basically consider them one riding style to a completely different riding style. Now, my Suzuki Hayabusa, I love that bike. I love that bike more than any bike in my entire life. And then I transitioned to a Honda Goldwing, a 2022 Honda Goldwing at first, then a 2024. And it's kind of confused a lot of people as to why you would even make such a transition. Well, mine was simple. You know, I had double knee replacement, which made it hard for me to do the jockey style of riding. I couldn't get my knees up that high on the Busa in order to ride anymore. So I thought my riding days were over. And then I found a bagger model, a Honda Goldwing 2022 bagger that allowed me to throw my legs around it instead of stepping through it with the trunk. I threw my legs around it and everything was fine and dandy, or so I thought. Um, I could ride, and that was the biggest thing. The biggest thing is I could ride again, and I didn't have to get in that horse jockey position in order to ride a motorcycle. So that's kind of how I transitioned. However, had it not been for the knee surgery, I still would have eventually wound up with a Honda Goldwing, but I would have also had my Suzuki Hayabusa as well. I would have just had two of them in the garage because the Hayabusa was, again, my dream bike. And now my Goldwing is my dream bike for totally different reasons. I guess I'll have to talk a little bit about what a transition is like, because there is a major transition between the two styles of riding, and that's what I want to emphasize. They're styles of riding. It's kind of like a bass boat, and then all of a sudden you turn around and you go to a pontoon boat. You're in the water in both boats, but you notice the difference when you're on the water. Again, imagine a Formula One race car driver riding at the track, doing his race, and then getting in his SUV and driving down the interstate at normal speeds in a normal vehicle. That's a transition. Those are actually just different riding styles. Those are different driving styles. So that's kind of what I want to talk about quickly in this video, is I want to tell you about the transition, but in order to do so, I have to first give you my motorcycle history real quick so that you can see where I came from to maybe try to determine how I got to where I am. So let's talk about my first bike. My first bike was a 1976 Honda CT70 mini dirt bike. And I remember it because I remember mowing grass. I remember collecting bottles and everything to get gas. And, at that time, gas was, believe it or not, 50 cents a gallon. And that's the year of the bike, because my next motorcycle was a 1973 Yamaha 125 Enduro. A lot of people are familiar with that particular bike. A lot of people had them. But mine wasn't new. It was old. I had it in the early 80s or so. But, 79, 80, but it was that old. It was used. Back in those days, we all just, we did whatever we had to do to get a motorcycle. We wheeled and dealed, and most of the time we didn't purchase bikes. We made some kind of trade with friends with some other kind of bike or some other kind of thing, and we just collected. That's the best way we did, and we all shared our bikes, so we all rode around on different types of bikes. So that's how you get the experience with different variations. But It didn't matter if it was used or not. When it was your bike, it was your bike. You know, you were proud of your bike, even though your bike was beat up, had magnetos in it, had point. You know, you used to have to scrape with file the points just to keep the thing running. You had to keep it, you know, clean all that out. You started learning to be a backyard mechanic just to keep your bike running. Then, you know, I had a 1982 Suzuki PE 250 dirt bike. Now, I used to run that thing all over the place, and that's when I first started learning how to jump. You know, I used to jump ditches and stuff, and I got so good at it that I'd hit it faster and faster and faster until eventually you were up around the tree branches and hitting your head and knocking yourself off the bike. But I wind up burning the oil out of that and wind up locking it up. And then what would be my father-in-law motorcycle that he purchased was a 1985 Honda Rebel. Well, that's about the same time. Right before that, a little before that, I started working in the prison system, and you know, transportation. I was carpooling and stuff like that, and paying pooling. It's not really carpooling. It's where you pay somebody and they pick you up every day and take you to and from the work, and they work at the same location. Well, back then I started off as a correctional officer in the prison system, and I was riding a 250 Honda. I had lights on it. It was something. I thought I was cool. I'd go down the interstate, man. I'd have my work clothes on, but I'd have my jacket covering over my badge and everything, because even back then, being a correctional officer wasn't cool, and it's still very unsafe. But I'd have my badge and everything covered up, and I'd be riding that bike. And I can still remember to this day, going down Interstate 24 from Clarksville to Nashville, and you couldn't get that bike over 75 miles an hour uh, going up a hill. Now, if you were going on flat on 24 I-24, if you were on the flat parts of the road, you could get that bike up to the speed limit, and you were so proud of yourself. You really thought you were something until you hit a hill. Then the moment you hit a hill or a gust of wind of any kind, you weren't going. You couldn't get it up to the speed limit, and you just struggled and everything. I just remember that. I remember being so embarrassed that I could not get up to speed to go up the hills. But I rode that bike back and forth. You couldn't talk nothing to me. I was somebody. You know, I was working in a prison, had a badge. I was a teenager, and I had my own Honda brand new motorcycle. Although it wasn't brand new to me, my father-in-law bought it, and he we wind up selling it to me, and it was everything. I thought I was something. Nothing I couldn't accomplish. Then I went from that to my very first purchase of a motorcycle off the showroom floor, and that was my Yamaha 1988 Yamaha FZ600. Don't let that 600 fool you. That bike would go. And that's when I started learning that it is the cafe racers, the high performance, the sports bikes. I started realizing that that's the direction I wanted to go. There was nothing like it. I've received so many tickets on that motorcycle that I can't even count. My younger years on that bike, that was also the same bike in which I learned about wet leaves in curves. All of that was on that bike, and I really enjoyed it. It was my first bought off the showroom floor. Then right after that, I wind up crashing that one in Goodlettsville, Tennessee. I wind up crashing that bike at 100, I think it was 113 miles an hour. I went in, it was getting dusk, and I kind of went into a curve on a country road the gravel was gray. I mean, the road was gray, and so was the gravel, and apparently the road transitioned right into gravel. I didn't know it. I hit that gravel pretty at an angle, and I just wiped out. I tried to save it, thought I could, but I couldn't. And anyway, I went from that bike to a 1990 Suzuki GSXR 1100. Another beautiful, powerful bike. But that one there, see, back, you young folks that might be watching this, see, we didn't call them Gixxers. We called them GSX-Rs, and then we gave them a number: GSX-R 750, GSX-R 1000, GSX-R 1100. We didn't call them Gixxers, so that gives you an idea how far back we're going. Then after 1990, after I purchased that bike, I didn't upgrade for a little while because I was in the process of raising children. I wind up having 2 children, so there was a gap there. And then in 2013, right off the showroom floor, I bought the limited edition Canyon Yellow Suzuki Hayabusa, and my dream bike. That was the bike. Power, more power than anybody could imagine. And yes, it is true that I am a speed freak, or was, maybe still am, because you can't get that out of the Ryder. But I rode that bike a couple of times. I pegged the speedometer. Pegging means I basically buried the speedometer a couple of times only. After having that bike, I only did that a couple times, but I would average on that bike every time I went out. You could guarantee I was going 150 or more, usually around 150, 170, somewhere in those neighborhood. I was going to hit that at least 1 or 2 times every time I went out and rode the bike. That was a guarantee. It was also a wake-up call. I have children and all that, and I'm riding at ridiculous speeds. So eventually I started slowly tuning it down a little bit, but you would get that throttle, and then you would say, okay, let's do it once. So then I got to the point where I would go out and ride, and then maybe every fifth time I went out, I would take it over 150 or so. So those were powerhouse. That was a powerhouse bike, and it was the first bike I ever had in my entire life that would snatch your fingers off of the handlebars and just raw throttle. If you aren't gripped on it and prepared for it and just raw throttle it as fast as you can, it would pry your fingers almost completely off the handlebar. So off the grips, and that's when I knew, boy, that's a real bike. That was a real bike. And then I went from that to, again, having these double knee surgery and stuff, and then the bike wind up sitting in the garage for a long time, simply because I couldn't ride it anymore. I did everything I could. I tried. I just could not get my legs up like that anymore. So the days of scraping elbows and dragging knees around curves and stuff, those were over. So I thought my bike days were over. I did. I basically thought we were done. And then come along an opportunity to go to a dealership. I said, hey, I'm just looking around, and I saw this 2022 Honda Goldwing bagger version, and I was like, wow, let me sit on it and see what these Goldwings are all about. And when I sat on it, threw my leg over top, and I was like, wait a minute, that's a pretty comfortable position. So then I put my legs up on the foot pegs, and I was like, I could ride in this position. And that's when I was like, well, if you can make some kind of deal with me, I'll buy this bike. And because it was a 2022, it had 54 miles on it, still brand new, they made a deal, and I wound up buying that bike. And then, of course, some of you that watch this channel, you know that 131 days later, on May 11, 2024, I went to meet Cruiseman and in Chattanooga, and Southern Honda Powersports, actually, in East Ridge, Tennessee, which is right there at Chattanooga. And I wind up trading that blue one in and purchasing a white one, a 2024 Honda Goldwing DCT Tour. That's the one with the bags on it. And because the reason I was able to do that is because the dealership itself taught me how to step on the pegs and step through the bike. And they called it cowboy mounting. Never heard of it. But you step on the foot pegs, and then you stick your leg over and go right in between the seat and the back and the trunk, and it was on from there. That's where that was it. So what is it like to transition from a Suzuki Hayabusa to a Honda Goldwing? Your style is different. Your riding style will be different, and that's pretty much the nature of the beast. You're not going to take curves. Well, you might at first try to take a few curves and realize that you scrape instantly. I got lucky. I put air deflector on my feet, so they scrape before anything on my bike scrapes, so it tells me I'm not riding safe. But the bottom line is you go from raw power and curves. If you love curves, and I do not call them twisties, but if you love curves, then you like the sports bike. But also, I got to the point where I was going to transition one way or the other simply because I wanted to do a little traveling. And you're not, unless you're in your 20s, you're not going to travel far on these high performance pocket rockets. Okay, you're not. They're uncomfortable for long distance, and I wanted something that was going to allow me to go see the country, go see the United States, ride around, enjoy myself in luxury. And when you say motorcycle and luxury and you combine those two words, you automatically come up with a Honda Goldwing and durability and all that. So you can do all the research you want. But now I'm going to tell you, I almost got the three-wheelers, the Spiders. I think it was what do they call it? The Sea to Sky. I was going to get that particular model, but I didn't like how it rode on when you ride on top of it. So I wanted a different kind. So they have, I forgot, there's the different models of it. There's two different variations, and there's one where you're inside of it. So I kind of like the inside of the bike sitting where you sit a little lower. So I think that's the Spider or whatever. But I almost went that direction. Not anything against it, but hindsight, I'm glad I went with the Honda Goldwing. Because the Honda Goldwing can give you that little bit of feeling of power. You can put it in sports mode and kind of feel like you're on a sports bike. Let's say you might feel like you're on a 650 or 700, maybe 750, maybe you would feel like that. It's nothing compared to a Busa, but it wasn't supposed to. This video here wasn't about comparing the two. It was about how do you transition from one. How did I transition from the sports bike world into the cruise and luxury and touring world? And the answer is simple. You get older, you get more mature, and then you start wanting to do things in life that you enjoy other than just speeding. So I got a Honda Goldwing, and I'm proud of it. So for those of you that are in my Pocket Rocket groups and those of you that miss me out there on the roads, especially those of you in East Tennessee that could never keep up with me, sorry. I'm a Honda Goldwing person now, through and through. I'm not going to ever change it. So until next time, just live your life.